Good morning. Welcome to Hometown Heroes. My name's Rick Irving, and Mary Staffel is my co-host of our Hometown Heroes podcast. And Mary, tell us about our guest today.
Good morning, everyone. We're glad that you're here, and we're glad to finally introduce you to Carla Wicks. And some of y'all may have seen her recently on another podcast, Rush. But Carla is very special to us because not only is Carla a veteran, she's also one of our board members. She's one of our newest board members at Roll Call, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have her there. Carla is going to be doing all of our special events. So if you have a special event out there coming up that you'd like to get a group of veterans to, you've got a school that you'd like to have her come speak to, a civic organization, anything like that you'd like to get some veterans out to, please let us know and we'll put you in contact with Carla. She should have some business cards here shortly she could pass out. And that way, then we can include them. So, you know, what we think of is we've had some groups that have had, maybe a group that they can bring in a foursome to a clay shoot or a golf tournament or a table at a benefit that they'd like to gift to some veterans. Well, by all means, contact us or contact Carla, and we'll make sure to fill that. In addition to that, Carla is also a Gold Star mom, not a title that any of us would like to have, but Carla has done incredible things on her journey through dealing with the grief and the loss. And we couldn't be more thrilled to have her with us today for her to tell you a little more about her and her journey.
That's right. And Carla is a really special person, not just being an Air Force veteran, a great person, but a Gold Star mom. So, Carla, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up?
Well, thanks, Rick and Mary. It is such a pleasure to be here with you and the viewing, listening audience. I grew up in Kansas. Believe it or not, I'm not a native Texan. Kansas was home base for me until right after high school, joined the Air Force. And then I moved around quite a bit, finally landing here in Texas. Someplace that back in the day, I said, if there was 100 places that I would never live, this was one of them. I tell people, always be careful what you say you will never do, because you just may get an opportunity to do that.
That's right.
And growing up for me in Kansas was, I had a challenging childhood. One of the things that people that have gotten to know me over the years and people that have been my childhood friends know that I'm a very vulnerable person. I will lay it all out there. I feel like the best way we can be in relationship with each other is if we're real to each other. And too many times I'll meet people and say, hi, how are you doing? And they'll say just fine. And I know they're not. And so really getting people to get to that point where they can be vulnerable with each other and share the good and the not so good helps us develop relationships that are more apt to last long time into the future. So I don't tell people that my childhood was wonderful and I had the best upbringing. I didn't. My dad was career military, Air Force, retired as a senior master sergeant, and that was in our house too. I mean, I grew up with a very strict upbringing, and later on, not only did I go in and enlist, but both of my younger brothers did. One served time in the Army and one was in the Air Force also. So military has just been entrenched in me from my get-go. And I even did some work a while back when I was doing my paperwork for the DAR and found out that my great times 6 grandfather had served in the Virginia militia during the American Revolution, and just uncovering all of his stories and things about him, and actually traveling to Virginia and then traveling over to a little town called Ripley, Ohio, where there's a National Historic Landmark, a house that sits right over the river that my great times 6 grandfather got that land in a land grant because he was wounded during the Revolutionary War. And he's built a house there. And it parallels a house that is in Virginia that he had built prior. So, like I said, military roots go very deep with me. And it has always been a part of my life. So I'm grateful for that.
Are you a member of the DAR also?
I withdrew my membership a couple years ago because I found myself involved with so many things. I thought I need to have a focus. So I was getting very, very involved with American Gold Star Mothers. So I decided I was going to channel my interests and my volunteering and stuff in that direction, and did so for many years also. I mean, I'm still involved with them, but not as heavily as I was a few years back. But yeah, my great aunt, who was like a grandmother to me, she asked me years ago if I would finish my DAR paperwork and at least get recognized by them. So, yeah.
Your
That's
father,
pretty exciting to be able to trace your roots back like that. You know, I can trace mine back to the early 1900s on both sides of the family when they came over from Europe. But that's as far as that's really something.
Yeah, it is. And the house in Ripley that they just made into a National Historic Landmark, the family has turned it into a bed and breakfast. And I've only been there to visit once. And on the property out by this huge, massive tree was where he is buried with his wife on the property. So it's a cool place. I tell people if they ever want to go up to that area of the country to check out that bed and breakfast, because that house is gorgeous. It is just gorgeous.
and your father, he was career Air Force?
Yes. He did most of his work before he got married and had all of us 3 children. He was in Newfoundland for a while, and he was stationed, but he wasn't stationed any place overseas. A lot of his stuff was here, but he ended up at Richards Gebaur Air Force Base in Kansas City, and he did a stint when I was in 7th grade. I'll never forget, in Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, because my whole life had been in Kansas. And then he moved us right at the beginning of my 7th grade to Illinois, which is a very awkward time because you're going from elementary to middle school. And all of a sudden I was dropped off into a whole new environment. And then after a year there, my mother was homesick. And so we all came back. Well, by the time I got back to Kansas, all of my elementary friends had made their groups of friends in middle school, and here I came. And so it was kind of always on the outs. I was telling Rick earlier, people that know me now and see me as this very outgoing, don't mind speaking to people. That was not how I grew up. I grew up very shy, very introverted, very backward. And so it was very difficult for me coming back then for 8th grade to find out, oh, well, all my friends had moved on to their own little groups and I was alone. And so it was awkward all the way through high school until I entered the military. And I don't know where the shift happened, but along the way somewhere I just came out of that shell, and here I am today.
I think there's a lot of us like that, because we moved whenever I started the 7th grade, and it was so awkward. I didn't know anybody and didn't make friends good. So I was just kind of quiet and shy and kept to myself. But then I met somebody like Brenda Miller, or Brenda Linhart.
Mm-hmm.
We met in the 7th or 8th grade, and and then her group of friends. So it kind of helped me as I was growing up. So I know exactly how that is to be thrown into a situation like that. So, and then you joined the Air Force at 18?
Yes, I had just gotten out of high school, and about a week later I was off to Lackland in San Antonio, and spent the wonderful months of June, July, and August in Texas. And I mean, it gets hot in Kansas, but it's a different heat. I mean, I was being told I needed to take salt tablets, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And yeah, so I spent that portion of the summer. Maybe that was one of the reasons I said I will never live in Texas because it's just hot.
It certainly does.
Yeah, I went from Lackland to my tech school was in, well, we called it Rangoon, but it was Rantoul, Illinois, just north of
Chanute.
Yeah.
Don't shoot them, snoot them. I spent 5 years there. What year were you?
Well, I was there in 73, and yes, that was an interesting time too. I started out as an age mechanic.
Oh, yeah.
And when I met another guy in the Air Force and we got married, we got our, it was always exciting to wait for your duty orders because you never knew where you were going to get sent next, And I got orders to go to Andrews in DC, and he got orders to go to Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. And seeing that we were newly married, it was like he couldn't work on bombers and tankers at Andrews, but I could very easily transition to another specialty, which I did. I did not finish age school, and I became a clerk typist. And so I could go anywhere. So I decided, well, I'll just put in joint spouse forms and go to Guam. And then I got to Guam and I was like, what on earth have I done? But it was interesting. And like I said, I wish I would been a little bit older when I went in, because I know I would have made a career of it. I just know my personality now, I would have. And I've regretted it, because when I got to Guam and I got pregnant, we made the decision that I should be the one to separate and come home and use the GI Bill and go to college. And he would stay and finish his finish his time there. And then we would find out wherever his next duty station was. But having our first child in Guam was not on our radar. So I did. And then after he finished working and got his next orders, we were off to Minot, North Dakota.
Oh my.
And we were there for 4 years, and it was as hot as it is here. It is freezing there.
Yeah.
So my other 3 children came in rapid succession while we were stationed in Minot. So I tell people all 4 of my children were born within 5 years. I had Paul in 74 and I had Jennifer in 79, and the other 2 were in between. So they got to all grow up very close knit because they all went through phases of life together. And for me, the hardest one was going through the teenage years, because by that time I was a single mom and there were 4 of them and 1 of me. And that's where the military training came out. I just was like, guys, I got to sit you down and let you know it's my way or the highway. So if you find that you don't like it, there's the door.
Is that close?
I only had one of those children take me up on that offer. He didn't like my rules and didn't like the fact that I had a curfew time for him. And so he decided he was going to exit and go to the Army. And I said, well, we'll see how that works out for you. So
how did it work out for him? Did it work out?
Yeah, it was about 6 weeks later. My daughter got a letter, my youngest, from him that said, Jennifer, do not take the freedoms that you have for granted. But now we are very close. I mean, when I moved from Kansas to Texas, what finally got me here, I landed in Killeen, which when I got there, I thought, see, I said I'd never live here. And this, it just felt like it just wasn't home. I'll put it like that. And he was stationed at Fort Hood, and that's what got me there. Was I got a civil service job at Fort Hood as a hygienist, and it was right after Paul's passing. So he wanted me to come there so that he could take care of me. And that's what he said. He says, you can't stay in Kansas by yourself. So that's what got me to Texas. And I've tried a few times to leave, but now I've been here for about 28 years.
Does he still live in Texas?
No, he actually lives in Phoenix now, where my youngest daughter lives too. I have a daughter that lives in Waco, and then I have the other two are living in the Phoenix area.
Okay.
Yeah. I have my oldest lives in Waco. We lived there for 14 years. So
Yeah.
she still lives there with 3 of the grandkids. I was there on Saturday.
You were at the birthday party.
I was at a 3-year-old's birthday party, because that's a big deal in Mexican culture, is the 3rd birthday. I had no idea, but it is a big deal.
And so you got into the dental hygiene world. Is that what you did?
Well, I actually started out when I moved from Florida and after North Dakota, I found myself as a single parent, and I came back home to Kansas. A friend of mine got me a job as a dental receptionist. And from there, I was like, well, I like being a receptionist, but I really like helping the doctor too. So I checked out with the VA if they had an OJT program that I could possibly do that would teach me dental assisting and pay me GI Bill money to do it. And the VA said, no, we don't have a dental assisting program. So my dentist and I set about writing one and got it approved from the VA. And so now there is a dental assisting on the job training program that people can use and get their GI Bill money. So I became a assistant. And then after that, it was, well, I need to go to hygiene school. So I went to hygiene school. I tell people now I've done every conceivable job in the dental world except be the dentist, because I've gone on to get certified as a dental practice management. I've worked in consulting. I had my own dental insurance business for a while. And of course, I was 30 years as a hygienist, and finally retired from dentistry 10 years ago when we decided it was time for me to take early retirement so that I could homeschool our granddaughter that we adopted. She was getting close to middle school, and we both decided that my mom was a teacher and administrator all my life, and the public schools are nothing like they were years ago. And I just couldn't face the fact that she would be involved in that. And that means I would be involved, because I would probably be there all the time, letting them know what they're not doing. And so it was better that I just homeschool. So I did that for the last 6 years, and she finally graduated 2 years ago. So yeah, dentistry was a huge, huge part of my life from the time I got out of the military until about 10 years ago.
And then, you're retired from working in the dental field now.
Right. Yeah. I took early. I got out and started, doing other things. It was during that 10 years that we found out we had this adopted granddaughter, and I was trying to figure out what she was going to be good at. And we tried gymnastics, we tried karate, we tried cheerleading. We finally ended up at the community theater, and she just blossomed. So I went to work helping how I could, costuming, children's theater, giving her way too many pointers to the point where she said, if you know so much, why don't you do this? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to go on stage. But somebody tickled my ear to try out for like an extra part, like somebody that would just stand there or walk across the stage, no speaking. And so I bravely auditioned. And the next thing I know, I'm being offered 2 parts in a Tom Sawyer play. And I said, parts? That sounds like speaking. They were like, yes. And from there, that was all it took. I did that one production, and I was like bitten. It was the theater bug was in me too. So we spent 10 years, her and I shared the stage a lot in many different productions until she finally said, "Can you just stop acting with me?" She says, "I want to do my thing. You go over and do your thing." So we've been doing separate productions for the last several years. But now that she's graduated, she doesn't want to do theater anymore. But I still try to plug out a couple every year.
And you just had a production, didn't you? Maybe 2 of them?
Yeah, I did 2. The very first of the year, I was in Cemetery Club down in Cleburne at the Greater Cleburne Carnegie Players. And then just recently I was out in Azle at the Popcorn Theater doing Steel Magnolias. So,
Wow.
yeah. And now I'm getting ready to costume Sister Act, and that's going to be a huge but very fun production. I've done it before, and it's so enjoyable.
Well, you mentioned your son, Paul,
Mm-hmm.
and Paul was in the Navy.
Right.
And tell us about Paul.
Well, Paul was my first, and he was a very brilliant child. Not that all my children aren't, they are. But we knew from very early in his life that he was more on the gifted spectrum when he was at school, and things just clicked with him a lot quicker than they did with most kids. And he took he told me, well, I took him to see Top Gun when he was 13. And we were sitting in the movie theater, and he goes, "I'm going to do that someday." And I thought, okay. And then fast forward, he decides after high school, he's going to join the Navy. And I was like, okay. And he says, "Cause I still have that dream. I'm going to fly fighter planes." And I was like, okay. So they gave him his ASVAB scores, and they told him that he scored high enough to be in the nuke program. And he goes, "No, I can't see myself in a submarine. No, I need to be working with planes." So they sent him from Great Lakes to Millington, Tennessee. And he started out as an aviation mechanics structures. In other words, he was out there fixing the sides of the planes, the bullet holes, whatever. Mm-hmm. And from Millington, he got stationed in Virginia Beach. And the entire time he was in the military, he kept going to his commander saying, okay, my goal is I am going to fly fighter planes, but in order to go to Top Gun school, I know I have to get my college. And they said, "That's correct." And he said, "So I would like to leave the military so I can go get my college and then come back and go to school." And they said, "That's great, but you have to do 4 years first, and then we can talk about that." Well, this became a ongoing theme of his on a monthly basis of him going to his commanders and saying, "No, I really feel like I need to go now." And they really said, "Well, we really have to have you do 4 years." And so when he came back from being on the Stennis, when it went over to England and Ireland on a goodwill mission back in the 90s, they sent him to Reno, Nevada for some temporary duty. And while he was gone to Reno, Nevada, his commanding officer back in Virginia said, "This guy's achieved so much in his first couple of years that I think we're going to go ahead and approve him to exit the Navy early. We haven't done that for anybody else, but we're going to let him out, let him go to college and, be on with his dream, his goal." But he was actually killed in a vehicular accident in Reno. So he never got to know that approval was waiting for him back in Virginia. So after he passed, we had the dentist that I was working for at the time had a tree planted at KU, Kansas University, because that would have been his next stop, right outside the ROTC building. So, he had a goal and he had a vision, and it from very young, when he was very young. And so after he passed, of course, I took the time I needed to get through and work through the grieving process, which I tell people is a process. There are steps, and too often many of us get stuck in one of those steps and we don't complete the journey to full healing. And that was one of the things I wanted to do before I decided to pick up his torch and finish where he left off and serve families, because I said, you grieve and you're always sad at what I tell people has gone on before you. I don't like to use the word lost, because it's not like we've lost these people. They've just journeyed on to the next place a little ahead of us. But that was why it was real important for me to get through that before I started serving, so that I could be a little bit more composed. Initially, in those first few days after that knock on the door, you're not ready to really get out in public, because you can't get two words together without falling apart. So, but then I found my way, and since then I've been actively pursuing avenues of veteran service ever since.
Let me ask you a question. You talked about getting through the grieving process. Is that something that you get through, or is it just different levels?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, and we have a saying in Gold Star Mothers where we tell people we want to say their name, because we don't want people to forget who our children were. And I tell them, I said, grieving is not something that we don't get over the fact that our children are gone. We just find a new way to go forward. But there is a grieving process, and it does start with all the things that most people feel, the shock, the denial, the heartache, that they're the devastation. It'll never be the same. But then you go through the rest of the steps that bring you to a place where I tell people it's hard for me to describe it, but I can just tell you, if you will just understand. Once you find your way forward again, there is a joy on the other side that you can't understand until you've made it through. And Rush and I discussed this at length, even after his show that day. I said, he had just lost his dad. And I said, you take the best parts of them that came from you or reside with you, especially if it's a family member, and you pick up that mantle and you live it out. Because I often think sometimes, if Paul were sitting here and he were talking to me, he wouldn't say, oh, Mother, I want you to be a bitter, hateful woman at what happened to you. I want you to deny what happened. I want you to be so sad. You cry all the time, and maybe you can't even get out of bed. That would not be what he would say. And I know that. But it took me going through the phases of all of that, like the shock of like, what are you saying? This can't be. And being angry at, why did this happen? He was just 21 and he had this bright future, So I tell people all the time, it's never something we get over. It's just finding a new way forward.
And, being around the Gold Star parents, I've had the joy and the honor to work with them every year at their retreat and to hear their stories. And you're right, you just say their name. That's so important. And it's an awkward thing for a lot of people. They know that your child passed, but they just don't know what to say. And that was the first time I met Terry and Elizabeth. The Bozos were with them, and I felt so awkward because I didn't know, should I say anything about their children, or would I just sit there and listen to them talk? And we developed a relationship. And that's the most important thing, I think, is to keep that child's memory alive by telling their story. And
Exactly.
and Terry and Elizabeth have done so much to help so many parents go through what you went through. And to see, I mean, we don't have a war right now, but there's a lot of military kids that die, whether by suicide or accidents in training. And they come to the retreat, and to see, because they're in sometimes a very deep darkness in their life. And it's not something you can just go shake them and say, hey, it's going to be okay, because they have to process that the own way they process. And then sometimes I see parents that are at two totally different levels in the process, and then to see them come back the next year and see how they've grown, and then to see them start engrafting the new parents that have come in. So just a big shout out to the Gold Star parents and Terry and Elizabeth and their Gold Star Parents Retreat. But because of that, you got involved helping other people, especially Gold Star mothers.
I like I said, I waited until it was 2017 when I applied to Gold Star Mothers as a member. And like anything, if I get involved with something, it's just natural for me to then want to know how I can help, how I can be a leader, so over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to meet so many Gold Star mothers that are very near and dear to my heart. We've all had that bonding episode of the knock on the door. And as much as you've seen that, Rick, and I have too, with the Gold Star parents, it's the same way with the Gold Star mothers. You have them in all stages. You've got some that are it's just been a year since their child passed. And then you've got some like myself where it's been over 20. But it doesn't really matter. We all have that centralized theme that bonds us all together. And it's all about, our organization it's a veteran service organization, whereas TAPS is more of your trauma intervention. So a lot of times we will have moms join us. They're actually looking for that camaraderie, but they're also looking more for what they need is what TAPS can give them. Because by the time we get to Gold Star Mothers, we are full on veteran service oriented, helping veterans, helping our community, helping other Gold Star mothers and Gold Star families. And so we're boots on the ground, and we are constantly involved in activities of service. So the ladies have to know that they will be doing a lot of things, and they may be asked to talk. They may be asked to present something. They may be asked to go and represent at something. And so they have to find that way to work through their grief journey to where they can do that with some composure, but yet still on full on respect for the reason that all these women stand here is because they all have a child that they're now carrying on what they never got a chance to finish.
And you were an officer in the Gold Star Mothers organization?
Yes, I served 1 year as National Flag Guard, which was an absolute joy for me. Getting to go to Arlington several times, doing suicide prevention walks down the Washington Mall from the Lincoln Memorial to the Washington Monument. And just carrying our stars and stripes was huge. It was a very big blessing time in my life. I still am active with them doing some things, but it's just, these ladies are just ingrained in me now, just like some of the Gold Star parents that I've worked with. It's I feel like we're all serving together when we're out there doing what we do. some of us various different places. And I was blessed to find a couple years ago to find roll call. I happened to go into my dentist to have my teeth cleaned, and my hygienist, I said, "What are you involved in these days?" And she goes, "Well, I serve on the board at roll call." And I was like, "Oh, what's roll call?" And so here we are, fast forward to now. So thanks to Kim, this is why I found roll call, but I was looking for some place to do my volunteering, and gosh, it's local and close. And I was like, yoo-hoo. And now I'm just all in now.
You're all in now, aren't you?
I'm all in.
Yeah, we're incredibly blessed. Carla brings so much to the board. And Rick, I know you know Carla very well, as does I think everybody that has been making comments here this morning and wishing us a good morning. Carla just brings that energy and that organization, and there's so many skills that she has gained over the years, and all the things you've talked about. We clearly see, the passion, and really for us, that's probably the single most important thing, right? The passion to serve the veterans, knowing it is not about you on our board. It is about how do we better serve our veterans. So as long as we always remember that, I think we always do the right thing. So Carla has an incredible addition to the team, and we couldn't have got luckier than to have her be interested in joining the board.
She's a great asset, and it's really going to help our veterans get out in the community more. So
I know somebody asked me one time, because when I first came, of course, I hooked up with my buddy, Miriam. Miriam and I had met each other at a Gold Star parent retreat, and I walked into roll call, and she was like, "Oh, wow." And okay, so now we're the duo at roll call. And she asked me, what I'm going to put you in charge of the ice. It's kind of my permanent station now. I like it because I get to verbally say hello to just about everybody because they have to come through the line. But when I first got there that day, I was tickled to death, and just emotionally, it got me when these guys started coming in and the room started filling up, and I was like, this is amazing. This is definitely my new home spot. But somebody asked me, "Well, you're a veteran. Why don't you do that? Why are you doing this?" And I said, "Because I'm a Gold Star mother and we serve." And I said, "Yeah, I'll always be a veteran, but the serving is so much sweeter. It's so much sweeter." So
several of the volunteers are veterans, but it is that heart of service. And it's funny because you talk about the first time that you walk in a luncheon, and for folks, the first time they walk in, especially if they get there early, because I usually tell first timers, I suggest you arrive early, because if you don't, it can be overwhelming. But as you're in there and you watch the room, like I got there at 9:25 last week, Friday, and there were probably 30 or 40 in there already.
Yep.
And by 10:30, it was almost full.
Yeah.
Right.
You just watch as the room just fills and fills and fills. When I tell people we do a luncheon, they're like, "Oh, well, that's nice." And then they show up the first time and they go, "Oh, this is a lot of people," but it is a lot of people. So
it is. It's just tremendous. So I enjoy it. I enjoy it immensely. I tell people, I
Miriam,
say, we're not out there serving.
It's fun to watch you and Miriam together.
Do all their signals and everything.
Yeah.
They have their own signals and everything. They got a whole game plan going on. If you have Miriam and Carla, you don't need anything else. Everything is going to be fine. Okay.
And Miriam's special. Miriam, I kind of think of her as the wagon master, because she's keeping that wagon train moving all the time.
Yes, she is.
Now, you were a Vietnam era veteran, so you got pinned.
I sure did. That was a huge surprise for me. It was the year I was serving on the National Executive Board, and we were on our suicide walk that we do annually in September. And we were walking down the mall, and we got to the Vietnam Memorial, and it's just so overwhelming when you stand there and look at all those names. And while we were placing a wreath there, unbeknownst to me, my national board had reached out to Yvonne, who's in this picture. She was the head of the Vietnam 50th commemoration. And she had heard from my fellow people on the board that I had never been pinned. And so she did it right there at the memorial. And that was emotional. That was a but what it did was it just drove this passion in me to go home and find as many vets as I could that had not been pinned and had not been properly thanked for their service. Because coming home from Vietnam was not the kind of homecoming that I thought. When I raised my hand and enlisted, I thought, well, when I come home, everybody will be just so happy at the fact that I served and I went, and it was nothing like that at all. And since I've been actively pinning vets everywhere I go, I've listened to their stories, and the Vietnam veterans, some will talk, some won't. Some have horror stories that far surpass what happened to me, but it was a completely different experience than what we know in our world now. And so anytime I get a chance to thank a Vietnam veteran, especially, that brings another level of joy to my heart, because I know what they've had to live with. And I'm glad that the Department of Defense finally did a proclamation and set this program into motion. So, and during that whole process of doing that, I actually met a very wonderful guy that lives down in the Rio Grande Valley. He had contacted us about getting a Gold Star Mother marker for his grandma that had passed. And in getting to know him and his family, his dad died in country when he was a year old. And so he never knew his dad, but he has championed Gold Star activities in the Rio Grande Valley like you wouldn't believe. There's a school named after his dad. He's done a Vietnam documentary that's won multiple awards here in Texas. And Mario is just superhuman. And I love him and his family, but I was able to get him and his mom this very special surviving spouse and surviving child pin. And even though we've never physically met, because I've never been able to get down to the Rio Grande Valley, we have stayed in communication for the past 5 years. And he's just a great guy. And all of the Vietnam vets that I've had the chance to meet are just incredible.
Rick, you're muted.
That's a good story. And one day, I hope that you get to meet him.
I do too. I know our paths will cross someday. And, but yeah, they're all special. And I remember right after I started volunteering at Roll Call, we took a group of the World War II vets down to Austin to have their day of recognition on the floor of the Senate. And that was very enjoyable too, because those guys are incredible. I just don't know how else to say it. I know we're all going to miss something terrible in our lives when we don't have our World War II vets anymore. But just being able to sit and listen to them and be in their presence is an honor. And I didn't know that when I did some work with Gold Star Mothers, we were doing monuments. And I was able to help with some of those Woody Williams Gold Star monuments, one in Gainesville, and then one out in Lubbock, and one in Keller, one in Frisco. And I got to meet some cool people that were helping raise money, like this picture here with Erin Stillinger. Her dad, Randy, works with American Airlines and is so instrumental on helping people and veterans and military get from place to place. But we actually had an opportunity to meet Woody himself, which was an honor. And little did I know, at that same fundraising event in Keller, there was a guy in a red shirt.
That was Don.
I would later learn that when I met Mr. Hadley, who I'm standing by, that my friend Anita was standing by this guy that I would again run into when I got to roll call.
Whenever they did the groundbreaking ceremony for the Keller monument, we had just come from Wichita Falls at the Iwo Jima convention. So Fisk Hanley and Don were there, and Woody was there.
Right.
And, I got to spend 3 days with Woody, and sometimes he and I would be in the hotel lobby just talking.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about Iwo Jima or anything. It was just about his childhood and being raised on the farm and stuff. So he was an incredible individual.
Yeah, I was at that. That was right. Well, as a matter of fact, the week after that, my husband got COVID, because that was right during COVID when that Keller monument was dedicated. And what a special thing that was. And I was up at the one in Gainesville, and I've got other pictures of Woody in his red suit, and I don't know, it's just indescribable when you stand there at those monuments and all the people that come out, and many people, we're still educating people what a Gold Star is versus what is a Blue Star mom, what's a Gold Star mom. But we're getting there, a few people at a time, understanding. I just came from Colorado Springs at a conference, and the guy that works in the Starbucks at the hotel saw all of us women walking around in our white, which is our traditional, what we wear. And he said, I don't know how to ask this, but can you tell me what is all this white, And I said, well, we are all Gold Star mothers. And he goes, okay, what does that mean? And I said, that means that we have all lost a child that served in the United States Armed Forces. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. And oh, thank you for letting me know. So, yeah.
And this is part of your journey now.
Yeah. These are some fond memories of people along the way that I've had the opportunity to meet. Jamie Popwell, he works Flags for Vets, helps veterans if they want a flagpole and a flag in their yard. He gets it done for them. And then meeting John Rusty Lewis with the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo Parade. Little did I know that when my American Gold Star mother, past president Becky Christmas from New Mexico, got me in touch with him, I found out right at the couple years after I joined Gold Star Mothers that Becky and I were distantly related. And she said, you'll be interested to know that John is related to us too. So I got to kid him about that when we rode in the parade this year with Terry and Elizabeth. It was a cold morning in January, but we all got in a buggy together and did the parade. Next year, we're actually going to have a float. So I may be calling on some of my roll call people to join some of us Gold Star parents to fill this float that we're going to have in the parade. That's
a fun parade to ride in.
It is. And because we were all huddled together with blankets, we kept ourselves nice and warm. And then we've got Hannah. Hannah is a young lady in the Navy that I met when I was volunteering for Holiday for Heroes. We had gone to the Tarrant County Food Bank, and we were piling in all of these meals that she was going to give out at her Thanksgiving event. And I met Hannah, and we got to talking, and just a delightful gal. She was getting ready to go do some temporary duty out in Arizona. And I said, well, what are you doing tomorrow night? Because I said, I've been invited to come to Air Power Skyball and present the missing man table. And I said, I have 2 tickets. And so she said, oh, I'd love to go. So I actually brought her along, and what an experience for her. And
You did a great.
I actually have that picture there of the 2 skippers from NASJRB.
That's right.
We did Bells Across America, and Chris had me go over and cut the cake. I insisted she do it, but she told me to go do it. And I had the opportunity to have the outgoing and the incoming skipper in the picture with me. So that was
2 incredible
really special.
guys.
Yeah. And that other picture there is a Louisiana congressman. I can't remember his name right now, but this was taken back February, the week before COVID shut us down. We were all in DC at the National Prayer Breakfast at the Hilton Hotel. And then a week later, we would all be at home for the who knew how long. But just getting to meet, other leaders around the world, it's just been, it's something that could never been afforded me had I not been in the position that I was. And so every day I'm very thankful that I have the opportunity to share and be a blessing as I go around carrying on the mission.
Carrying on the torch of
Yeah.
Paul.
Yeah.
Well, what are some of the things you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I guess the biggest thing I'd like to say is, number one, never, ever do I want anybody to feel like they won't ever amount to anything, no matter what the upbringing has been, no matter what travesty, what has happened in your life. There should never be that time when you think, I'll never amount to anything, because truly, I believe every single person can be anything that they not only set their mind to, but they also set their work towards, because it is work. Everything that's worth anything in my life has always come because I worked for it. And I always look for opportunities to do something pleasant to somebody every day, whether it's just wave at them, smile at them, say hello. I mean, some people never get that. They can go days without any human interaction. So I say, I think our world would be a whole lot better place if everybody practiced smiling more and trying to be interactive with at least one person a day. And I don't hide the fact that I'm a Christian person. So the biggest part of me is, and has always been, giving thanks for everything, not just the good things, but the bad things. And I've always found that it to be true that you grow the most when you're down in a valley, when you're trudging through the mire and the muck and the mud, and when you don't know where the next day is going to be, up or further down. I have found that if I stay true to keep going forward and keep going upward, that God meets us there and helps us. And some things are, for me, indescribable to be able to tell people that how there can be joy after such tremendous devastation, losing a child, having them leave here and not be with you. And I say it's true for anybody, anything. You can lose a job, you can lose your income, you can anything, you can lose a marriage, a partner. And I tell them loss is loss is loss. But finding a way to turn that around and make something good come out of it. I will leave you with a parting story of how I know this to be an absolute truth. And that is that when I was a dental hygienist working at an Arlington office, I had a patient on my schedule that day, and the front office staff had told me whatever I did not to engage this woman in any conversation whatsoever. Just get her in, clean her teeth, let her go. And of course, that was very intriguing to me, number one. But when she presented to the office, she had the countenance of somebody that was very angry and very hard. And I put her in the chair and I just went about work. But I had also prayed and said, God, if there is an opportunity I'm supposed to say something or do something, just give me an open door and I'll walk through it. So I was cleaning her teeth and she wasn't saying anything and I wasn't either. I was doing what I was told until all of a sudden she said to me, I know my teeth are a wreck, but I can't help it because nothing means anything to me anymore. Nothing. And I thought, there's my open door. So I said to her, can you explain a little bit more about that? Because I said I had a time in my life when I thought it was all over and nothing would ever, ever matter to me again. And it was when my son died. And she turned her head and she looked at me and she goes, your son died? And you're working? How are you doing that? And I thought, well, okay, door's open. Here we go. So I said, well, and I shared the story of Paul. And she reached up and she grabbed my hand and she had me put my instruments down. And I looked at her and she was crying. And I'm sorry, this story still is emotional, but I kicked the door of my room shut. And she sat up and we hugged and we bawled and we boogered each other's shoulders for good must have been a half an hour. While she just, you could feel it coming out of her, just wretched, that crying so hard that your body shakes. And she said, my son died. And I've been trying to figure out how to go on and I can't do it. I just can't do it. And I said, well, that's what I thought. But I said, here are some steps that I took that I actually started going again. And I said, the biggest one was I wanted him to know I was going to do whatever it took to make sure people remembered him, but that also his death, if it didn't matter for anything else, it would matter for somebody I would meet and their life would change. And when she sat back in that chair, her countenance was different. There was life in her cheeks again. And I said, and I'm going to tell you right now, no matter what you do when you walk out of here, if my son didn't die for anybody else, he died for you so that we could meet. And I don't know where that woman is today, but I know I watched a physical miracle happen in her that I would have never had that opportunity had Paul not gone. And so I do it to this day. I'm always looking for somebody that will make missing him and having him transition to heaven ahead of me mean something. So I tell people all the time, don't forget the things in your life that have been hard, but look at those things and say, how can I make some glory come out of this for somebody else? Not for me, but for somebody else. Turn that outward. Don't turn it inward, because it's not about me. It's about y'all. It's about the people I'm going to meet. And every day there's somebody. And so I tell people, I say, we never get over them. We just find a new way forward. And that's what I carry every day.
Wow.
God put you exactly where you needed to be at exactly that moment. And that is such a powerful testimony to our Creator and all of. It's just so amazing every time you hear a story like that. It couldn't have happened any other way, and without the right people at the right place at exactly the right time.
Right.
So it's
what
amazing.
What you said about if Paul hadn't passed, you wouldn't have that opportunity to share.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, being around the Gold Star parents, I love them so much. And I think if their child hadn't passed, our paths would never have crossed,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real blessing. Here's Susan Turner says, thank you for your service, for your testimony, and for sharing you and Paul's story. And there's our friend Miriam.
I love you too, Miriam.
And Pamela's a great story. So, wow, it's been a good time to be with you today. And just tell us Paul's last name.
Paul Joseph Stock III.
Okay. Always remember and never forget Paul Joseph Stock III.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for being a great person and sharing with us and loving the people like you do, because you bring a real joy to so many people. And that little introverted girl back in junior high and high school finally blossomed. So,
Right.
so we just enjoyed having you, and we're going to keep you on. Usually we say thanks and everything, but we're going to talk about roll call a little bit and some of the things we did. You're a board member, so we just really appreciate you stepping up to be on the board of directors. So those that don't know, roll call is our monthly veterans luncheon, and this last month we had last week, which was last month,
Friday,
our June meeting. We had the Medal of Honor Museum. They brought their bus and they talked to us a little bit, and that's a real asset to our community to have the Medal of Honor Museum, because it gives us a chance to actually see a lot of history about the Medal of Honor recipients, but also to meet a lot of Medal of Honor recipients. We've had several attend our meetings over the years. And, just about 2 years ago, Holidays for Heroes, we have the time to bring gifts and at Carrie and Bob Orticle's house on Saturday night before the gift giving the next day. And here comes this Suburban, and there were 4 Medal of Honor recipients in it. And I thought, that's pretty special. But it was because that museum's right in our backyard. So we're looking forward to that. At the roll call, too, we had this flag that Susan Irvin brought, and it's got, I think these guys were all Marine snipers or something, the second flight into Iraq, and the flight attendant had them all sign this flag, and Susan's had it preserved in this beautiful frame on display. And so that was really a special deal. And then we had our good friend Shiloh Harris come to talk to us for a little bit. And we had Shiloh on our podcast just a few weeks ago, a great American hero. One of those guys that, he got injured pretty bad, and he could have had the attitude that, hey, it's over, I'm done. But now he's out there motivating people, sharing his story, and a great American hero.
And he's so funny.
And a funny guy.
Oh, he's funny.
But, roll call, we see great people coming to share their stories and just coming to hang out with us at roll call. So, Shiloh, thank you for showing up. And then it was the 10th anniversary roll call, and Birchman Baptist Church, where they've hosted us since probably about 2016, I think. And Dr. Bob Pearl and his wife, Deborah, they were there. The church has been so gracious to let roll call use their facilities at no cost. It's every month, year in, year out. They host us, and we just wanted to give them a little token of our appreciation. And it was so neat because Liberty Phillips with Bridge to History had a flag that had been to Normandy, and she had jumped with that American flag. She presented it on behalf of roll call and a certificate to Brother Bob. So that was just a great time. And then Liberty had some of her ambassadors. These are children. 4 of them came from California. 2 of them are local. And Bridge to History, they had all been to London and Normandy to study World War II and D-Day with Liberty. So just a great meeting, Mary. You did good. y'all knocked it out of the park that day.
Oh, thanks. It was really a very special day to celebrate that 10th anniversary with two of the people that were at the first luncheon. So Jack Dye and Bill McIntyre were both part of that initial group. We tried to get Kevin here. He was out of the state. Kevin, who started it, but it was kind of neat to have two of those guys still there in the room with us of that original World War II group of just a handful of veterans.
And it kind of grew pretty large, didn't it?
Yes, it has.
If we had a place to house 1,000 people, we could fill it up every month.
Oh, yeah.
I was driving down Camp Bowie, and they have the Hometown Heroes banners up, and I saw Bill McIntyre's banner and Don Gray's banner and Judge Corb's banner. Drive down Camp Bowie, and you'll see those banners honoring those veterans. So just a great time at Roll Call. And the 20th of July, we have the Battling Betties, the Beer and Betties at the Old Ice House in Keller. This is the second annual fundraiser for Roll Call, and it was fun last year, and it'll be fun this year. You can go to roll-call.org to get more information. And our friend Larry O'Neill, he's the one that was instrumental in getting Hometown Heroes podcast started. The same day at July the 20th at 5 p.m., he's going to have boxing in Cowtown at Old South Pancake House, where a lot of the old boxers come and the new boxers, and they kind of have a reunion. So, Larry, thank you so much for being instrumental in getting us going. The second annual clay shoot for Roll Call is going to be Sunday, October 13th. There's plenty of time to sponsor and sign up your teams now. We have a lot of door prizes, gun raffle. That's going on now, and we'll have 20 guns given away in 20 minutes at the clay shoot. So
yeah, and you don't even have to be present to win. You can get your raffle tickets, and you could stay home if that's not a good day for you. But we'd rather you come out because we really have a lot of fun. So the Battling Betties, that was so much fun last year. It's going to be a great time this year. Every time we get together, we try to make it as much fun as we can, even if it's just going to Boomer Jack's after the luncheon.
That's right.
Whatever we do, we want to just enjoy each other's company, because that's, at the end of the day, what it really is all about, is coming together in fellowship and camaraderie and just loving each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, this is the end of this podcast for this week, and we just love doing it. Mary and I, I'll have to check and see, because we're knocking on the door at our 100th episode. So we've been around 2 years now, and 2 years next month. So it's the voice of the heroes and the voice for the heroes. So thank you all so much for being here. Carla, thank you so much for being a guest with us today. We just are so blessed to have you on the Roll Call board. And I know, like Mary, we are blessed to call you our friend. So
thank you. Likewise. I love you guys.
Love you too. And thank you for all our loyal listeners. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we will see you next week on